Good morning, and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we hang out, we talk about games, board games, role playing games, card games, miniature games, things that are beautiful, things that are of value, in my opinion. I apologize. The studio is in the process of undergoing a transformation. Thanks to all of you people who support us at Iconic Production Patreon or on YouTube. It helps me do cool things like this. And if you're a member of the Patreon, I'm going to take a panoramic of the new layout when it's all done. But first of all, a couple of good mornings and thank you. First of all, good morning to Grom and hopefully John Doom will show up. And to James. James, I'm so excited. I'm actually working on, this morning I was working on the Han Cluster Foundry stuff, putting in the hindrances and the edges and the gear. Cannot wait to play a game with you on Friday. So, and then also a big shout out and thanks to Gutsy, who is our newest Patreon member. It is wonderful to have you as a part of that, and hopefully we'll get to chat online here soon. Oh, I have answers. Shoot them to me in Discord, and I will get to them this morning and a little later today. So, what are we talking about today? Title of the episode is Ambiguity is Not Complexity. And I will admit that this is inspired by one of my new favorite YouTubers, Trill. He does great videos about world design and RPGs. Go check him out. I will put a link in the show notes to his channel. But he did this great thing on moral complexity versus moral ambiguity, and I want to go a step further and talk about alignment because I feel like that is a key component of what we are talking about. But overview of the idea of ambiguity versus complexity is Game of Thrones and a lot of modern grimdark tendencies. So I think grimdark has a very special place in the fantasy genre. Writers like Martin or Baker or Abercrombie are all writing a morally gray world. There are some people that try to do the right thing, there are some people who try to do the wrong thing, but in general, the world is morally gray. And the thing I would say about those three authors, and Anna Smith Spark, if you guys have not read Anna Smith Spark's Court of Broken Knives, or any, which is the start of a trilogy that she wrote, or any other of her books, and you like grimdark, you owe it to yourself to go read some of her books. But what they do well with their morally ambiguous characters is they give them depth of character. They give them a very complex individual worldview. Kellis in the Second Apocalypse, if you take Kellis and Esmenet and all of the characters, Akamian, all of those characters, they're all very deep characters. If you read Joe Abercrombie, say one thing about Joe Abercrombie, but he writes very complex characters. You know the reasons they're doing what they're doing. When that gets translated over to gaming, morally gray or morally ambiguous games tend to use that as a shorthand for anyone could do anything they want at any point. And that's not really complex, that's sort of lazy world building and game design. I don't mind morally gray settings. In fact, I love morally complex settings. But I would say that, hey, Padre, good to see you. And to you as well, Tink, good morning. What the difference is that in a morally ambiguous setting, the GM has basically said, hey, anything goes. And in my mind, alignment-wise, very often they are saying that this setting is chaotic neutral. Anybody can kind of make a decision for whatever reasons motivate them at the moment, and that's not complex. That doesn't actually force difficult moral choices, which is where the complexity comes from. If you look at Joe Abercrombie, Giselle thinks he is a good person and then strives to be a good person, but when the chips are down, his true colors kind of come out. Logan Ninefingers is kind of the same character. In Baker, Akamian is willing to sacrifice anything, including the woman he loves, for the sake of the world, until he realizes that the world's savior is a liar. And it collapses his entire worldview. He is put in these two... So complexity does not mean choosing one evil or gray goo from another morally gray goo. Moral complexity comes from making hard decisions based off of your character and your character's choices. I wouldn't even say that choosing the lesser evil necessarily makes it complex. It just makes it ambiguous. No, Padre, I think Warhammer has actually has a very strong, we'll at least call it ethical alignment as opposed to a moral alignment. Because good and evil, I mean, one of the interesting things about the Warhammer Fantasy, or the Warhammer 40k universe, is that we have the most despotic, fascist government that the universe has ever seen. And yet, it is the only thing keeping humanity alive. The ethical alignment of law versus chaos is very strong in the Warhammer universes. Morning, John Doom. So, what do I mean by moral complexity? Well, so here's the thing. I personally think that the alignment system in Dungeons & Dragons represents this perfectly. But other games have their own ways of dealing with this. Savage Worlds has hindrances. GURPS has disadvantages. Burning Wheel has beliefs. This is not a uniquely alignment discussion, but I think for the purposes of my example, this is a place where alignment shines. Now, a lot of people don't like alignment because they feel like, it's restricting me. I'm like, well, listen, you're playing a game about playing another character. You should be restricted. You should play the character as the character, not as yourself doing whatever you want. Like, there should be restrictions on what your character should do, because they are not, they are somehow slightly different from you. But anyway, I digress. A lot of people don't like alignments. They think it's an old, outdated trope. And we're going to talk about tropes next week. We're going to talk about tropes as mythology. So I don't have a problem with tropes. I think they're perfect. They're a shorthand for going, here is, even down to the fact that alignment used to have alignment language. It was the language of war, so that you knew who was on your side versus those who were not. And so, for me, where we get moral complexity is with the 9-axis, or the 2-axis, 9-spot alignment system. If you have several characters who are all good, but slightly different shades of good, lawful, chaotic, and neutral, they're all going to approach the same situation differently. If the lawful ruler of the town is planning to invade someone else to get food for his people, well, the lawful good person may be okay with that. Sorry, the iconic puppy is sitting right here next to me. Oh, wanting some attention. Say hi, Zilla. Good girl. It is well-deserved attention, Grom. She is a good puppy. So, whereas the chaotic good person who values freedom above all may say it doesn't matter that he needs to feed his people, that doesn't justify an invasion. Now take that from an NPC perspective. Two NPCs may be in conflict, but going about their conflicts completely differently because their alignments vary. A neutral evil or a lawful evil villain compared to a chaotic neutral villain are going to, or rulers are going to interact in completely different ways. And what's interesting about the alignment system is that the alignment system provides moral complexity while still providing the shorthands that we as game masters, we as players, we as authors enjoy. I think to just wipe the alignment system out is part of this desire to have a morally ambiguous setting, which somehow feels like it's more real or it's more detailed. If you guys will excuse me real quick. Zilla cameo, yes. I will tell everyone that I will tell her hello from everyone. She will love that. So I feel like this desire to wipe out alignment is a desire to replicate the stories that people have come to enjoy in modern cinema and literature. This morally gray, ambiguous wasteland. And really all it does is it robs you of the ability to have touchstones that allow depths. Much like a mine that goes down into the earth where the riches are, you need support pillars. And I think alignment system is one of those support pillars that was created long ago, the early days of our hobby, that is really, really important. Now, you may be saying, James, I'm not playing a game with alignment. So what does that mean? Am I just SOL? Like, I'm just destined to sail across the faceless waves of a morally ambiguous campaign setting? No. I feel like, and John brought this up, the hindrance system fills in those gaps for not having an alignment system. And even without the hindrance systems, most games have an implicit alignment system, if you will, in their setting. So even if you don't take any of the hindrances in Deadlands to say, hey, I'm going to be a hero, or I'm going to fight this way, or I'm going to, act this way, Deadlands still has a real clear moral compass to its setting. Reckoner's bad, Twilight Legion good. Now, you'll have varying depth and complexity and shades of gray. I'm not saying shades of gray are a bad thing. I'm not saying that we need to have the lawful good versus the chaotic evil and nothing in between. What I'm saying is, don't confuse, and I'm going to point a finger at Martin right now, don't confuse a world of sociopaths with moral complexity. The majority of people have shades of gray. They have moments of brightness and nights of darkness and all the different shades in between. And yet, people trend towards certain actions, moral codes. Well, and Padre's got a good point, right? You can tack an alignment system on, like Pathfinder for Savage Worlds does. But again, you don't need the 9-point alignment to get this. I'm using that as my tentpole example of a system that pushes back against this moral ambiguity that has become very pervasive. And even worse, we get, and I won't point out the media that I'm speaking about, but we get shows who have gone like full circle into the point of wanting to introduce moral ambiguity to a franchise or a genre that is usually defined by stark morality, and end up wanting us to root for the villains because they think that's moral complexity or interesting. And I'm like, no, it's just bad writing or bad game mastering. Introduce some complexity. Give your characters hard choices. Not necessarily between two evils, but if you want to go morally gray, present them with a tough choice that has no clear-cut good or evil answer. If the town is being invaded by another sentient species, and the players come to find out that the elves are invading the humans' town, either from a great wrong that happened long ago that they are trying to rectify, which they can't anymore because the people who did the wrong are gone, or because they're being invaded from the other side by something else. That's complex. Which side do the players lean to? If two different people have an equally valid claim to something, and the PCs are wanting to adjudicate that, give them a tough choice. The other thing about moral complexity is it leads to moments of self-sacrifice or true sacrifice in a way that moral ambiguity doesn't. A morally complex setting will shore up the idea that some things are worth dying for. Some things are worth leaving behind, to give up for this greater goal. And the problem with morally ambiguous settings is often those moments of self-sacrifice are either derided or washed away by the next sociopath who comes along and sticks a sword in whatever plan the hero sacrificed for. Now, you may be sitting there going, but Jay, that's how the real world works. I would argue that it doesn't. I would argue that the arc of humanity, especially in the last 2,000 years, has been trending in a certain direction. And while I do think that we all have moments of selfishness that come into our lives, I have the hopes that when the chips are down, most of us do know right and wrong and have the strength of character to make that decision. So, let's see here. So when you do it, it allows reasonable people like Ned Stark to look like a paladin in the face of everyone else's sociopathic behavioral model. Right, and when that came out, that first book, I think because of the Starks, we had a clear moral compass. And as the Starks have been brutally murdered, for no other reason than to say honor is a lie and the sociopath wins. The Littlefinger is going to win every time against a Ned Stark because Ned Stark has morals and Littlefinger doesn't. I mean, here's the same thing. We get the same sort of story in comics, and yet the hero survives. Batman prevails even though he has lines he won't cross and the Joker doesn't. James says he's always felt that the black and white alignment systems of D&D doesn't cover the complexity of even the most stalwart and pure heroes. Well, here's the thing. I don't think it's meant to. I think D&D is the alignment system in D&D is to provide a touchstone for your character. Not to say that all lawful good characters always do X. No, because even in a single alignment, you're going to get a ton of variety of how people think that alignment is best served. But it still provides a morally complex framework for players and GMs to hang their campaign setting on, to just throw it out. Ambiguity, that's the word I'm looking for. Ambiguity does not equal complexity. In a lot of ways, it just is a gray goo of choices that are being made. Now, I love the 9-point alignment system, if you couldn't have guessed. But my first real alignment system that I played with was the Palladium Books alignment system, which I like possibly even more than the 9-point alignment system. So in Palladium, you have principled and scrupulous characters, so two good alignments. You have two selfish alignments, unprincipled and anarchist. You have 3 evil alignments: miscreants, aberrant, which is essentially like lawful evil, and diabolic, which we would probably map pretty clearly to chaotic evil. And what they do is they say, in general, a diabolic character does these things. In general, a scrupulous character views the world like this. In general, an anarchist character does this. And I think that's the thing to remember. You would have, I would call out the shallowness of a world that only uses the 9-point alignment system as shorthand for saying, here's how this person is going to act, as I would with a morally ambiguous world. The goal is complexity. The goal is characters who behave realistically based off their own codes and ethics and morals. And too often, I see ambiguity, moral grayness, as characters can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and be on your guard because everyone's essentially a selfish sociopath waiting to bury a dagger in your back. And that's how I play John Doom's Savage Pathfinder game. Right, Padre, Tolkien called it the long defeat. That the goal of good is not to triumph over evil, but to hold out in ever smaller concentric circles of light until the good comes to set things right. I love that. So that's it for today. A really long one. I do apologize for the slight break I needed to make for Zilla's comfort, but appreciate you guys all saying hello to her. We'll be back next week. I know for a fact that Tuesday we're talking about tropes as myths, and so if you've ever been accused of, well, that's just a tired old trope, hopefully this will give you some insight into why you actually should take that as a compliment and not let players or people on the internet or others tell you that you are somehow a lesser GM for using tropes. Tropes are the closest things we have to myths in modern society, and I think we're going to talk about that on Tuesday. And then I have some more topics that we're going to cover between now and the end of November, including an article that was written by one of our new patrons that I'm really looking forward I'm percolating on a way to talk about that on the show. So that's it for today. This has been Behind the Screen. I am Jam. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Until then, have a good one.